Around 100 years ago, several nation-states in the Old World fell to various forms of authoritarianism. We know them as fascism and totalitarianism.
And I just want to finish with this. The 1951 Refugee Convention, which Britain has now abandoned, was established in the wake of the Second World War, when the world looked with shame at how many people who were fleeing Nazi Germany had doors shut in their face, how many lives could have been saved if we had a welcoming attitude towards refugees. History does not look kindly on countries that treat refugees in this way. I'm deeply ashamed, and I have no problem saying that this is an incredibly immoral and duplicitous bill.
Alex?
While the U.S. had similar movements within its borders, they never gained a solid foothold, and as a consequence, never scarred the American psyche as it did Europe's. Unfortunately, this means that the U.S. has never had to come to terms with fascism in the same way as countries in the EU. Instead, we've been made to obsess over leftists as if they were the same potential problem as Stalin or Adolf, despite the fact that leftists have had far more activity in politics in Europe, and not the same feared effect. The U.S. is a republic of states that also obligates the states themselves to be republics, but this has clearly broken down. We have overt fascism and authoritarianism disintegrating the fabric of the federal republic itself. And so far, the federal government has proven itself unable to guarantee international human rights within U.S. borders.
I cannot adequately put into words the trauma and despair that comes with waiting to either lose your own life, your child's life, or both. For days, I was locked in this bizarre and avoidable hell. In a matter of minutes, I went from being physically healthy to developing sepsis, a condition in which bacteria in the blood develops into infection with the ability to kill in under an hour.
Just days after a Republican member of Florida's state legislature proposed legislation to make the Democratic Party illegal, another Republican state senator here in Florida came around to one-up him by proposing legislation that could eventually make it illegal to criticize Ron DeSantis, his administration, any member of his cabinet, or, of course, any member of the Florida state legislature. In fact, to a degree, his bill would make those kinds of things illegal unless, of course, you register with the state. You will be required under this legislation to submit a monthly report by the 10th of each month showing which articles you wrote, who published them, and who paid you for those articles, and of course, how much you got paid for it. In other words, if you want to criticize Ron DeSantis, they want every piece of information available about who is paying you to criticize DeSantis or any other fascist Republican in this state, because that is what this piece of legislation does. We're not marching towards fascism. We're in it. Like, we've arrived. So no more of this talk of, oh, we're seeing the signs of fascism. No, we're living in it down here. This state is becoming dangerous. I mean, it's already been dangerous for the last year or so for women and members of the LGBTQ community and, of course, the black community. And now they're coming after the reporters who've been talking about those things. Those people are now under attack. That Ron DeSantis already keeps an enemies list of reporters here in the state of Florida. And that's what this would do. This is what this gives him the power to do, because now he'll get to see everybody. Maybe a couple of blog posts slipped under the cracks and he doesn't know that he's being criticized by certain people. Well, now it's going to be filed with the state. They will have their full enemies list. And I'll be on that too. It's pretty much what I do every day. It's only a matter of time before my profession down here in the state of Florida becomes illegal. I've lived here my whole life. I get questions from people all the time like, hey, things are getting bad. What's it going to take for you to leave? I'm there.
And I'll also point out, not to get too far afield here, but why the hell are 41 peaceful protesters, climate activists in Atlanta, protesting this Cop City police training complex, charged with domestic terrorism, facing 35-year sentences? Most of them did not commit a crime. At worst, some committed a property crime. They're facing terrorism charges, and this guy made decisions that poisoned millions of people, and he's treated like a respectable CEO. I mean, our justice system is failing. It has become an instrument of corporate power rather than a check on corporate abuse. It's a real problem.
And you see, connected with both of these stories in East Palestine and now in Atlanta with Cop City, journalists either being arrested or interrogated. I don't want to be overly dramatic, but this is what tends to happen in other countries with authoritarianism, fascism, where, just arbitrary criminal things like domestic terrorism, journalists arrested, and corporations running the show.
Florida is a fascist state, and many other states, from Ohio and Georgia to Texas, Missouri, and Tennessee, are demonstrably failed republics. The situation presents a challenge for states within the U.S. still operating as democratic republics, who now have a moral obligation to offer asylum and refuge from the kinds of persecution seen around a century ago. Some states are doing so, such as Minnesota. States that are still democratic republics must call a spade a spade. What is happening in the U.S. is a descent into fascism. What is happening in the U.K. is not terribly different. The EU and other members of the international community should make it clear that political refugees from either the U.S. or UK are welcome. Young adults can enjoy debt-free higher education, a decent work life, access to health care, and enough prosperity to have a family.